Capture the passion.
Welcome back to CPTP Season 4, Episode 6. Today we're going to talk about the different options you have as a transfer student at Cal State LA. We have a very special guest, Jessica Dennis, Department Chair. Jessica, tell us about yourself.
Hi, well, I am the Department Chair at Cal State LA in the Child and Family Studies Department. My background is actually in psychology, so I've not been in the Child and Family Studies Department or early childhood education for the most part. My Ph.D. is in developmental psychology from UC Riverside, and I've been at Cal State LA since 2005, but I was in the psychology department, so I was teaching research methods and statistics and things like that, but I've always loved developmental psychology, and so when the Child and Family Studies Department was looking for a department chair in 2019, I said, well, I would love to.
Yeah.
I was definitely looking for some opportunity for leadership, so I came over, and it's a very different department. All of the career options for students, far more career options, I would say, than psychology in many ways. At least there's more of an emphasis on that, and I've learned a lot being department chair in Child and Family Studies.
So prior to being department chair, did you always want to work with higher ed?
When I actually, when I started my bachelor's degree, I started at UC Riverside, as a student, freshman student, and I wanted to be a social worker. I originally, I wanted to do something where I could support children and families. My family growing up was struggled economically, and we had, issues and things like that. And so that's what I wanted to do. And when I went to UCR, they didn't have a social work major at the UCs. So I said, okay, well, I'll do psychology. That's the closest thing. Learn about children and families. And then at UCR, they're very focused on research, and so you get involved in research. You kind of see there's all these research opportunities in labs, so you start to get involved in that. And then it's like, oh, this is really, I love science, so it was a way that you can kind of connect science and research-based, but also focused on how to, support people.
Right.
And so, but being a professor, never would have thought about that.
Really?
No, because
what was your goal? Just social work?
It was social work. So I wanted to go to a master's in social work afterwards. But I was a first generation college student. My mom didn't go to college. My grandpa did, but my mom and my dad did not go to college. So the idea of teaching college, being a professor, teaching that's not something I could do. So yeah.
Where did you grow up in?
Riverside.
Riverside.
Yeah,
okay.
Moreno Valley, Riverside area.
Okay.
And but what I think changed my mind into making, letting me know, okay, maybe this is something I can do, is that I had a professor that kind of reached out, and said, you're doing really well in my class. Have you ever thought about going into doctoral studies? Have you ever thought about getting a PhD or becoming a professor? And I was kind of like, well, if he thinks I can do it, maybe I could. And so then I started thinking about that and, really kind of preparing myself and figuring out what do I have to do to get into graduate school. And so I applied for the doctoral program. Teaching, I was very afraid of teaching, very shy and afraid of public speaking. So the idea of having to stand in front of a class was, I couldn't imagine. I mean, we didn't even have to do public speaking classes at UC Riverside, so I hadn't really done much. And so I remember, I started to, okay, I can do this. And I think I found, as soon as I started my PhD program, you get to be a teaching assistant, and you get to you teach sections where you get to, teach the classes. And there's something about teaching where it's not a focus on you, it's on the material and helping people to understand. And I loved it. I love teaching. And so it was like, okay, I actually love this even more than the research part.
Yeah. So that's what ventured. So then you finished your PhD. What was your area of research?
So it was developmental psychology, but with a focus on family relationships, especially in adolescence to adulthood, and a lot of emphasis on um, economic issues, but you can't look at economic issues without also looking at cultural issues. And
Right.
if you're studying the population in California, you're going to have to also look at ethnicity and racial issues and culture. So I really during my doctoral studies especially started to really become interested in cultural issues. Um, and so, a lot of my research when I started at Cal State LA, was with emerging adulthood Cal State LA students, mostly Latino,
Yes.
and what were the issues that they were facing. And so, a lot of them, talking about family issues, the thing that would come up would be, well, my parents are, from another country. My parents are less acculturated, and I want to do. They don't always understand, and so acculturation gap became something I was really interested in. And so for a few years that was, I think, some of the things I was studying. And then like identity issues and how do people make sense of who they are and figure out what they want to do for their career. And so and I still have a lab. I still have students. Some are psychology, some are child development students, and I kind of let them. They're mostly master's students, so I let them kind of what do they want to study. And so I mean, I've looked at social media issues. I've looked at one of my most recent was on hookup behaviors and things like that in college students and how they. So it's been very varied, but always usually a focus on early adulthood and the issues that they're facing, whether it's with parents, peers, identity.
We've had a couple of guests this season that we've talked about trauma and childhood trauma, into how it's affecting them as adults now.
Yeah.
The previous episode we brought Monica in, who's a parent, and she dealt with a lot of trauma growing up, and how she's trying to change the way her nervous system responds so she doesn't respond the same way to triggers with her child.
Right.
Do you have any research in that? Maybe you can share some of that research with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for young people today, they are looking at, well, how, and I think this has probably always been true of every generation, but like many generations ago, people would just spanking and do as I say, not as I do, things like that. And I think people today are starting to go, well, what do I want for my children? And figuring that out for themselves. And so I think, we're seeing so much more like gentle parenting and parents that are aware. And I think a lot of that is education. A lot of the students that have had trauma, they go into psychology or child development because they're sort of trying to figure out, well, how can I be better than what I was raised? How can I help my children to avoid some of that trauma? And I think that's where a lot of our students do gravitate, both in both psych and child development. And that's why I did, certainly.
That's exactly what got me into child development. I remember going into ELAC out of high school, not knowing what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something in education.
Right.
I took a child development class, and it was so fascinating to say, oh my goodness, that's why I behave the way I do. That's why I respond that way. And then eventually led my career into studying and researching child development. As a preschool teacher, I see children and they behave a certain way, and it's like, yeah, you're definitely a product of your environment. And a lot of the times I think that that's challenging because sometimes parents kind of resist that, or they don't own up to it. What Monica talked a lot about was, well, as a parent, that's the best that I could do. A lot of resentment there, a lot of healing that needs to go on. But tell us about Cal State LA. So we have different options there. We have a great department, not to be biased, but we have a great department, amazing leadership in yourself. What are some options that students can look at transferring to Cal State LA in the child development department?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I came to that department, I was so excited by the fact that there's such an emphasis on careers and helping students to really figure out what they want to do. And so we only have two options. We have the, for the bachelor's degree, we have the general option, which I would say at this point, about 90% of the students are in the general option because it's very flexible. You have a foundation in child development. So, if you have an associate's degree for transfer, you'll have you'll have all the lower division classes that you need mostly. And then a lot of upper division classes that go into a little bit more about each, aspect of child development. And so it can help you to kind of, whether you want to go into education, healthcare, social work, it's giving you a good foundation in child development. And then you have to do 7 electives. And with those electives, you can focus on different careers. Now, transfer students usually come in with several electives. So they might have, because they've are in most of the time, they're early childhood education electives. And so when they come to Cal State LA, they can keep those, early childhood education. They can continue with those, or they can also explore other career options with the general. They could look into, one of the things that we have is for people that are interested in working in the healthcare industry. So child life specialists, yes. And we call it the sort of, you don't have to select a pathway, but it's sort of informal. You can mix and match electives, but we call it the children in healthcare settings pathway. But we have 3 classes that would give you a foundation in what child life specialists do. Child life specialists work in hospitals, and they support children who are undergoing treatments, and they help the children to understand what the procedures are going to be. They do a lot of play therapy. They also help them with like coping after these treatments that they're going through. They help educate parents, and so if you chose those electives, you would get a chance. You can even you can actually do an internship in a hospital setting, and awesome. and learn about that. Yeah. It's not, a lot of people are interested in that pathway. It's an amazing career to have, but it's a little bit hard to get into that career because so many people want to do it, and there's only so many hospitals, and a lot of people. So it's in high demand. Well, it's not high demand, and that's the thing. There's from students, yeah. Right. And so there's so many, and the people who are child life specialists, they love it so much that they're child life specialists for so long that you have to wait till someone retires to get into it. But we've definitely had some students who have been able to, especially if you go on and get a master's degree and then you have to get like a clinical internship. We've definitely had some students who've been able to achieve it. You might want to have one of them on the podcast because I can definitely refer you some people. Definitely, yes. And then the other pathways we have where you can actually get certificates. We have a couple of certificate programs that you can get with your diploma. So one of them is the Child Abuse and Family Violence Certificate. Oh, right, yes. Dr. Levy does that program, right? Right, exactly. And so you take a few classes. So those are your electives that you take. One of them is like a social work class and a communication disorders class, and then some of the classes that we have. And then you can do an internship where you would work with children and families who are undergoing issues with maltreatment and things like that. A lot of times the internship is at like the family courts that are near Cal State LA. And then you get a certificate, and that's a really good that's a really good certificate to have if you're interested in either doing like counseling and therapy with children or social work, because it allows you to kind of get some experience with the things that therapists or social workers would do, and then it looks good on your resume. We've definitely had students come back and say, having that certificate actually helped me to get a job with the county. And so, if you want to be a social worker, you can also go on to a master's in social work after you finish your bachelor's in child development. But this is a good way to, build some experience while you're doing the undergrad. Right. And then we have another certificate, which is Youth Agency Administration Certificate, and that's with Dr. Kumjan. And that one, you learn about nonprofits, about working with children in families and young people that are with nonprofit agencies, things like after-school programs, girls and boys programs, things like that. And so you take a few classes. Some of the classes actually are on like the administration of nonprofits, so you can learn about, like handling the budget and things like that of nonprofits. And then you can also get your field work and do your field work in a nonprofit agency. And then, of course, we have early childhood education. So if you're interested, if most of the transfer students have already kind of had a taste of early childhood education. But if they want to continue with that, we have we have some more advanced topic electives if they hadn't taken them all at their community college, and then they can do advanced field work where they could either, one of them is that they could, if they work already in a childhood setting, if they work in a preschool, they can get field work using their work hours, and they get course credit for using their work hours.
Okay.
Or they can choose the other class, which is where they would be placed. We would find them a placement, usually at the Anna Bing Children's Center, but sometimes at other centers.
Yeah.
So we have that one. We have, what was the other one? We have family life education. So all of our classes meet the requirements that you can get a certificate, or it's a credential to become a family life educator. And that is a lot of people aren't very familiar with what is a family life educator. A family life educator is someone who would work in the community doing family workshops and things like that. So you might be hired by a hospital or maybe a school district or something to do parent education programs, or to do programs for teens on sex ed or something like that. So you would be hired to educate families and about whatever is the topic that you're most interested in. So that's another possibility that people can do. And of course, then we have a lot of people want to do K through 12 teaching. So we do have so our other option is specifically for people that want to be elementary school teachers. And with that option, you don't get to choose electives. It's a very specific set of classes that you have to take, and they're all, because all of the classes are related to the topics that you would teach as an elementary school teacher. So elementary school teachers have to teach math and science and history and math, and all of that, visual and performing arts. So you actually, instead of doing electives, you're taking a couple extra math classes, a couple extra history, and so we just made that option a little bit more flexible. In the past, we haven't let transfer students do that one because it's so many classes, it's very specific. But I think by 2024 for sure, I think transfer students will be able to do it, no problem. And what it does is it allows you to, doesn't make you a teacher for K through 12 automatically, but it does make it so that you don't have, you get out of taking one of the exams to become a teacher. So one of the exams is the California subject exam. And so rather than taking this big 3-part exam on math and history, you take classes that show that you can teach all of those subjects.
But you need to pass those classes, obviously, right?
You have to get at least a C or better. Yeah. And so, and then you still, if you're interested in that path, you would, after you finish it, you are able to waive the CSET exam, but you still have to go on to a credential program. And the credential is it's usually about 2 years. It's more courses, and it would be student teaching. Now, we also, so that's for elementary school teacher. If you want to be special ed, you could do that pathway, especially if you want to teach elementary special ed, you would still need the CSET. If you want to teach middle school or high school, you probably would just want to do option 1, and then you would pick a subject and you would do a credential in that subject. But there's going to be a new credential coming out soon.
Right.
So
Yes, that's the one that we're excited about.
Yes. So the new credential is going to be ready we're accepting students will be starting in spring 2025, and it's called the Early Childhood Education Specialist, PK3. It's a really long name, but we just call it PK3 because it basically would allow you to teach pre-kindergarten to 3rd grade in the school districts. And as you often know, the school districts pay a lot better a lot of times than the private. You can always teach early childhood with just 6 units, or even less. Sometimes you can get hired, but with the credential you would be able to teach in the pre-K all the way up to 3rd grade. There's such a huge demand for teachers. And
so pre-K, that includes TK, ETK?
TK, yes, all of that. And so and that program is specifically if you wouldn't need to take the CSET, so you wouldn't have to take that exam with all the subjects. Instead, what qualifies you to teach that or will be having a child development background. So if you have a bachelor's in child development, you already meet the subject matter criteria. Now you need a credential, and the credential, instead of being a 2-year program, it's going to be a 1.5-year program. So it's perfect for child development students. You don't have to take the CSET, and you'll get to teach those. As long as you like teaching pre-K to 3rd grade, you like those ages, you can do that program. It's going to be an excellent program. So we're really excited. We've been partnering with the College of Education because all of the credentials are offered in the College of Ed. So we've been partnering with them, and we're going to have some of our classes, some of our faculty teaching the classes in the credential. And when you do your student teaching, you have to do half your student teaching in pre-K and half your student teaching in K through 3. Or I think maybe, I'm not sure if it's K through 3 or 1st grade through 3, but you have to do half of it with early childhood because they want people who really have an understanding. They're having so many more TK classes, that now we have a universal TK or pre-K. And so all 4-year-olds are eligible for pre-K now in California. They have a demand for teachers, but we don't want those classes to be just like a 1st grade class or, just constantly, ABCs. So they need to be developmentally appropriate. They need to have students who are willing to become teachers who really understand children.
Right, yeah. That sounds fascinating. Through my experience with students, when they ask about especially with the community college students, more of, I want to go into teaching, or what can I do with child development? It's always those 2 questions. I want to go into teaching, what do I have to do? Or what can I do with the child development degree? And I always tell them, I say, well, it really depends on what you want to do with it. There's all kinds of options. It's just pretty much depends on.
Right, yeah. And certainly for teaching, it's the perfect option for teaching. It doesn't matter what grade, it's a great option for teaching. But yes, even if you're not interested in teaching, there are a lot of other things.
Yes,
and so if you're interested in working with children and families, then it's the perfect degree for you. And a lot of people say, well, what about psychology? Would psychology be better? If you are really interested, like if you want to be like a psychotherapist or you want to be a counselor or something like that, you can actually get your bachelor's in child development and then maybe do, a few extra classes in psychology so that you have like the neuroscience and some of the other things that they want you to have. And then you could definitely go on to a Ph.D. in developmental psychology, or you could go on to like a Ph.D. in clinical psychology working with children. It would definitely be possible to do even that. And a lot of people go into masters in counseling or masters in like school psychology or things like that. I mean, even if you want, I would say it's the better option than psychology, because psychology, we never really put a lot of emphasis on career options. Like it was much more research and just the emphasis was always research. A lot of people did want to become clinical, but and there's that too in psychology. But I just think there's more paths and more jobs out there with child development.
Can you take the path of child development, undergrad child development, and then do a grad studies in psychology to do clinical work?
Yeah, especially. I mean, you would have to. There might be some prerequisites to the clinical program. It would depend whether it's a master's in clinical or whether it's a PhD in clinical. There might be they might want you to have like abnormal psychology where you learn about psychopathology, or they might want you to have neuropsychology and biological, some of the brain and behavior stuff. And then they'd want you to have statistics. So it might be a little challenging. There might be some prerequisites, but you would be able to do it, especially if you did a minor in psychology.
And then having a minor is a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
It opens up more pathways as well.
Right. It's hard in child development to do a minor. We don't usually encourage students to do a minor unless they have a very good reason, like they want to go to a PhD in something. Because the child development program does have a lot of requirements and so many classes that you have to do. And sometimes it will delay graduation if you're doing like a huge minor. But, if a minor is just like maybe 5 extra classes, it's 1 extra semester, then you can often do that.
Yeah. So, what about grad studies? What are the options? I get a lot of students that will finishing their undergraduate, and then it's like, I want to keep studying. I don't know what I want to do yet,
Hmm.
so I want to stay in school. I want to see what options are. Actually had a lot of students with a lot of interest in teaching higher ed, and I tell them, I said, you might want to look into child development.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so like we have our master's in child development,
Mm-hmm.
and our program is specifically it's kind of a variety of people. Some people are doing the master's because they would like to go on to a PhD, and so having a master's gives you the opportunity to maybe do a thesis,
Mm-hmm.
maybe get a little bit of research experience, and it makes you more competitive to get into a PhD
Right.
program. And we some students do that, and others are doing it because they want to get more in-depth understanding of child development. So some of them maybe want to be preschool administrators, and so by doing the masters they can um, kind of do an internship or a field, they can do their field work
Mm-hmm.
where they really kind of get some mentorship in running a preschool. Or they might want to be a child life specialist, and then
Right.
having the masters, they can do more field work in hospital settings, make them
Mm-hmm.
more competitive to get those internships. They could do
Right.
the internship that they need. So yeah, it's a great program for people who kind of want to get more in depth into some kind of career option in child development. We definitely are. We have a pretty high acceptance rate of students. Especially if you have like over 3.0 GPA or so, you might have a good chance of getting
Mm-hmm.
in. But the other master's options are in the College of Education. So, like in the education department, there's masters. Well, if there's all kinds of masters in education. So you
Mm-hmm.
could do like a master's in special ed or a
Right.
master's, and some of those you could do while you're doing the credential. And then they also have masters in counseling in the College of Ed. So they have, I think, four different ones. One is masters in counseling with applied behavior analysis. So if you like
Oh, okay.
working with
Okay.
like children with autism and other things,
Right.
you're learning how to kind of teach them using behavioral
Mm-hmm.
therapy. And then they have the masters in school psychology. So people who want to be like a school psychologist. And then I think that they have the master's in family therapy. So people who want to work with children and families, especially in school settings, and they often will
Mm-hmm.
accept child development students. Like child development students will kind of meet all of there's not like an undergrad degree in those, so that it's a related major. You
Right.
don't usually
Right.
have prereqs. You can do any of these masters. And what is the other one? But yeah, they have masters in rehabilitation counseling.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Wow. So there's a lot of options in there. One of the questions that I want to know your perspective. Um, During COVID, we found that a lot of people started opening up their own little businesses,
Hmm.
their own little side hustles. Um, it, I saw through population that I work with, not just at the university, the college, and then the preschool,
Hmm.
a lot of them sort of got influenced by that and wanted to go that route, as opposed to going back to school or continuing school into thinking that, hey, you know what, I can do this and be well off financially, as
Hmm.
opposed to doing 2, 3, 4, and even more years, including a credential, when I can be pretty good over here. What would be your perspective into persuading students back and to focus on their academic career over just doing like a side hustle?
Well, and like what by side hustle do you mean? Like, opening their own like daycare or like or OnlyFans, things like that.
I've heard of that one too.
Right.
Yeah, and I heard that one pays pretty good too, from what I've
Exactly.
heard. No, more of like I saw a lot of candy with chamoy being sold, and
Uh-huh.
a lot of people. I know a friend that both of her daughters opened up nail services, not necessarily nail
Okay.
salon, but nail
Mhm.
services,
Mhm.
hair services. These other more, I guess maybe trades that they could do, but you don't necessarily need to have that license. You can do it.
Right.
So I.
Yeah, you can do it informally. I mean, I think that I think that if you are interested in working with people, then you're gonna need a degree. You might be able to get a job where you kind of work with people, even if it's you could open your own daycare.
Mhm.
Um, but you're going to be able to, I think, have a more secure job, probably be able to maybe get, get other, be able to move up in, for example, in your preschool, things like that. If you have more education, you're often going to sort of hit a wall where like, this is fine for now. And then you realize like, I want to be able to move up. And so if and working with people is so rewarding. Like there's, I mean, and that's the thing. Like if you love doing hair and nails, then that's, that is great, and that's what you want to do. But if if you have to think about, is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? And I think working with children and families is often there's stress involved. I mean, it's not always easy, but it's something that is so rewarding. And like for example, having a master's degree, if you are teaching preschool, maybe you get burned out teaching preschool or teaching elementary school. Well, you could eventually go into administration, or you could eventually start teaching college. If you have at least a master's degree, you can teach at the community colleges, you can teach at Cal State LA. And so a lot of, it allows you to have options that, if you kind of get burnt out in one thing, you have more options the more education that you have. And I think that's like even having a PhD. I have a friend who she's been she's taught at Cal State Fullerton for like over 20 years, and she has a master's degree, and she had been, she loved teaching, but eventually she's like, I want to, be able to do other things at Cal State Fullerton. So she eventually realized she needed to go back and get her PhD. She went and got her EDD at Fullerton, and now she's able to, like she's the director of the online learning, and so you can do other things instead of just, teaching the same classes over and over. And you can, so the more education you have, the more, you can kind of like try different things, and you just have so many more options.
I know we had this conversation, I think it was sometime last year, I think it was. I asked you the difference from a PhD and an EDD and into, because that's pretty much the route that I'm taking.
Thank you.
Right, so help us understand the difference, PhD, EDD.
So EDD would be an education doctorate, and a PhD is a doctor of philosophy. And so PhD is the doctorate for, it really means that you have a doctorate and you've done a lot of research. So any PhD program, whether it's clinical or it's a PhD in education, whatever it is, it's going to have a lot of research. So when you do that program, it's going to be research and statistics. And you are definitely, you have to analyze that data.
So if I don't like math, don't go that route.
Well, you at least have to like statistics, and I didn't like math, but I love statistics. So you can't be too afraid of it, and it's it's applied. No,
it's not that bad.
No. It's so much. It's taking math but making it useful. Like these numbers mean something. It only requires like algebra. It's not like you have to do calculus or anything like that. And so
it sounds scary.
It's not. And that's why I love teaching statistics. I taught it for many years. It was my favorite class to teach, because like helping people who are afraid of math to see like, this is cool math. This is fun math. And so that's where PhD programs, you're going to have to do statistics. You're going to have to do a research, dissertation. EDD programs, now, there's not always a lot of difference, but they tend to be a little bit shorter. Most PhD programs are usually 5-year programs. Even if you already have a master's degree, they will usually have you do at least 4 or 5 years. They might, the master's can help you get into the program, but it doesn't and it might help you test out of a couple of classes, but they don't okay, well then you just do 3 years. Some schools will, but most will want you to do the full 5 years, and they really want you to immerse yourself in research. So for EDDs, it's a doctorate in education. So they often are like 3-year programs. They're for people who are a little bit more focused on applied issues. Like it might be the focus on community college leadership or K through 12 leadership or something like that. And you do a dissertation, and it's a research dissertation, but it's not, there's not as much expectation that you're going to become like a researcher yourself. You're going to go into something that's more applied. You might go back and be a principal, or you might be, a faculty member, but teaching more. So it's, or something that has to do with leadership of a community college. So again, it's more focused on that. There's also like PsyD. In psychology, the PsyD is focused more on clinical. So you still do a little bit of research, but again, it's expected. You're not going to be a researcher and a faculty member per se. You're most likely going to be a clinical psychologist.
So which would be a path that you think would give you the most options?
The PhD gives you the most options, because with PhD, especially if it's clinical, for example, if you're interested in clinical psychology and you get a clinical psychology PhD, you can become a therapist. You can open your own practice, or you could do research and you could just be a full-time researcher, or you can be a professor and have your own lab. Like, you can do any of those things. But if you do like a PhD in developmental psychology, for example, that's mine. I'm not trained to do clinical, so I can't do the clinical part. I could do the research, I can do teaching, anything that has to do with that. And when it comes to, if I want to stay in academia, I want to teach at a university, most of the time the PhD is what they're looking for. It's considered higher than the EDDs or the PsyDs. So you could, if you have an EDD or a PsyD, you can get hired at a university, but it's a little harder than if you have a PhD. So PhD gives you more flexibility.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't need a master's to pursue a PhD or EDD, do you?
No, you can go. EDDs. I think EDDs you might often need to have a master's. I'm not sure. But for PhD, for sure, you can go directly from the bachelor's to PhD. And that's what I did. And because basically it's a 5-year program, the first 2 you work on a master's degree, and you do a master's thesis within the first 2 years. And then the last 3 years are the dissertation and the PhD. So even if you come in with a master's, it helps to have a master's, because you're competing, like they're looking at all these applications, and they might have 100 applications and only accept like 10. So having a master's demonstrates that you're ready to be in a PhD program and that you can do the work. And so, it helps. But if you don't have a master's, you have to have a really high GPA. You have to have I don't know if they're still doing GRE, grad record exam scores, but you'd have to have you have to really stand out if you're if you don't have a master's. But then, yes, if you go in there, you do get your master's. So if you already have a master's, you either just call it a second-year project, or you could get a second master's if it's slightly different than your other one.
Okay. That sounds like a great opportunity for anyone that's thinking not just the bachelor's, but also pursuing a graduate.
And I think, when I was in psych, a lot of the students wanted to go to grad school. They wanted to either get a master's or a PhD. But in child development, we're not seeing as many. And I think it's because people don't realize that they can. They don't realize that, it is an option for them. Especially, a PhD, you do have to have a high GPA. That's one of the things, because you need to show that you can really understand the material, not just at the C level.
What's a
GPA, what's the GPA requirement? It depends, but I would say, 3.8 or above is often what you would want. Now, if you have a master's, like if you have, say, a 3.5, and you go get a master's, and then, that should be fine. But they still will look at your undergrad GPA. So if you have less than a 3.0, it's almost not even possible. So they want to see people who are like A, B students. And so, but if you have above a 3.8, you definitely could do it. And it's something you could think about. And, if you think, you would want to do research and you want to do teaching, get involved in research. All of the faculty in Cal State LA do research. All of the child development faculty have research going on. And so talk to them, ask them what they're doing. They often need students to kind of help work with on their projects. And so, yeah, there's research opportunities out
Yeah,
there.
there's a lot of research opportunity there. One of the things that I want to ask you, because I remember being told a lot throughout my career, is I don't need a paper with the school's name on it to validate what I do. I do a good job. A lot of my experience, I worked for LA Unified for 16 years, and a lot of the staff there, they got grandfathered in as the requirements were increasing.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating coming in. I remember coming in back in 2007 when I first started. Um, I was frustrated because I'm thinking like, how?
Yeah, sometimes they will, not have, and yet they're able to like move up and move
Right.
up, but you don't see that anymore, and it's
Right.
becoming harder and harder. I mean, like even in the K through 12, people teaching right now, I think you can teach TK without having
Without having the credential.
yeah, without a credential, maybe not even without a bachelor's. So I don't know if you have to have a bachelor's in most districts, but you definitely could be in a TK classroom, but soon it's going to be that you have to have that credential. And you won't even be considered. And so I think, so a lot of the TK teachers now are like going, okay, I have to go back
Right.
and get it. And so, yeah, it gets more and more competitive.
And that paper with the university does mean a lot.
Yeah, it does in that case. Yeah.
Right. And it's not just the sense of saying, hey, I went here and I got that. It's more of like what you're doing with it. A lot of students will tell me, well, what can I do with that degree? What can I do with this degree? My response is always, well, what are you going to do with it? It's not about you graduate, now you're entitled to anything.
Mm-hmm.
This is just saying that you completed these courses, you completed this program, you're at a whole different level. And that says a lot.
Yes, it helps, but you still have to have the experience. Before you just had to have the experience. Now you have to have the degree and the experience. And so, yes, a lot of students finish their degree and they haven't, they've just worked at Target or maybe not worked at all, and that's fine, focusing on your classes, is fine. You might be still young, and so, but as soon as you finish that bachelor's, if you want to do something with it, you're going to need some work experience that's relevant to whatever area. So, but if you're at all interested in children, there's so many jobs at preschools right now. You can work at a preschool any number of hours that you want. I mean, you probably could find a preschool, and maybe you don't want to be a preschool teacher forever. It's great experience. It's no matter what you want to do, you always will have that experience. And so, there's no reason why you can't get some experience, whether it's working as a volunteer somewhere or doing fieldwork class or something. You should definitely try to get that, because that experience combined with a bachelor's degree, that's what makes it.
Put you at a whole different level.
Yeah.
One of the things that helped me doing my undergrad at Cal State LA was I was working at a preschool. I was working at USC's preschool, and I remember working in the day, and then in the evening taking the classes, and then just connecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm learning about this theory.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it now in the classroom, and it's like, oh, so now when the exams came, it was more of, let me just think of what was Jorgito working on?
Exactly,
and I connected it to that theory. Oh, that's what it was, and it connected so well.
It makes you a better student,
right?
So and so then you have more to write about in your papers. You have you're learning more from your classes, and so absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it made things easier for me as a student.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I also preach to my students now is get involved in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Do something. I always welcome them. Come to my class if you want in the morning, and you can see we'll pretty much talk about the children and everything that we talk about in class in the evenings. So we have a lot of students out there that are up in the air into, should I transfer?
Mm-hmm.
What should I major in?
Mm-hmm.
The program that we work with here, CPTP, is specifically mentoring those that want to go into the teaching profession. What would be your advice to them into not just recruiting them from Cal State LA, but sharing with them a great opportunity, experience, education, knowledge they're going to get? What's your advice to them?
I would recommend doing an associate's degree for transfer. I would recommend either something related to early childhood education or child development or something like that. For teaching, um, we're trying to make the pathways a little bit more clear. So I think I don't know if Rio Hondo, some schools, offer like the education associate's degree,
Right.
Any of those. And then, with the associate's degree, you're going to have all the general ed classes that you need. So then when you come to Cal State LA, then you'll be pretty much ready to, graduate on time. See an advisor, talk to people, ask questions. We will try, sometimes if you just like transfer and you just look, and try to do it on your own, you don't realize that maybe there might be some ways that we can do a substitution and we can help facilitate your graduation so that you don't, it looks like, oh my gosh, I have to do, 3 years, when actually if you talk to somebody, they might be able to get that down to fewer. So, do the transfer, keep, and just keep at it and really, don't give up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your insight, knowledge, experience. Thank you for sharing all that with us. Hope this resonates with us that are watching, and this can be a good opportunity for us to paint a good pathway. Thank you for your time. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy.
Capture the passion.